Record myself. Hi. Well, good morning to all, and it's good to be here. I mentioned last night at St. Philip's that being here at St. Anthony's and St. Philip's, it sort of feels like all I can think of is my favorite hunting jacket. It might be getting older, but it feels so good, and I can stick my shells and my pheasants and everything. And that's what I feel like here. I feel like I got my good old jacket on. A couple things. Take this off for now. I fell down and went boom. Going up the back steps at the rectory, rushing to get the bulletins, I tripped. I wear that for a while till it gets, sprayed a little. So, two things. One, the homily for today about the multiplication of the loaves, which is very interesting. It has to do with the Israelites leaving the slavery of Egypt and going into the Promised Land. But first I wanted to address, I think some people, when I first came here, I mentioned about rehab, and so some people have asked me about that. And I thought, well, I know a little bit about it. I don't hide it or anything. I'm alcoholic. I come from a family of true Irish tradition. In fact, the DNA we test out as pure Celtic, so 100% Irish on both sides. Like I said, my mother's Dwyer, born in Tinta, and my dad, obviously his surname is Donahue. I grew up thinking that the ability to drink massive amounts of alcohol was a gift. I had never heard of the word alcoholic, and big mistake. Then about 5 years into priesthood, with the history of my family and everything, I thought I'm drinking too much, so I quit, and I went to some AA meetings, and so for 14 years I didn't drink, but I always thought of it as something over there. If I just stay away from it, it'll stay away from me. And that worked for about 14 years. And then in March of 2004, I was in Washington, D.C. for a meeting, and a classmate of mine from Seoul, Korea, we had dinner together at a very traditional Korean restaurant. The menus were in Korean. Everybody spoke Korean except me. And at the end of the meal, I turned around, and here's a shot of liquor for him and for me. And I said, oh, no, I don't drink and whatever. Oh, no, you have to have it. You have to have it. And I said, no. He said, it's a tradition. He said, if you don't, you're going to embarrass me in front of everybody. Well, today I know what I'd say. But back then I thought, well, it's been 14 years. What is one shot going to hurt? Well, I'll tell you what, that was a shot heard around the world. I remember after that being on a metro train, just holding my arms up, saying, where have you been? All of a sudden you feel like everything's great, you're in heaven. And then it was curtailed a little bit because I went off to war after that. It's hard to get drinks in the desert. But when I got home, I hit it pretty hard with everything. I had a lot of combat. Of course, I used that as an excuse. And then I drank pretty heavy for 9 years. And the gift for getting into sobriety treatment was when I retired from the Army and came back. And in Newark, New Jersey, I got caught on an up escalator, and I crushed my left leg and broke the right one, and I was in a wheelchair for 5.5 months. I had to learn how to walk again. I had to learn everything. I couldn't do anything standing up after that. I couldn't even brush my teeth. So they had to retrain my brain. And during that time, of course, I was on painkillers, opiates, which apparently I'm not addicted to. They don't bother me so much, but I was drinking too while I was on those. That bothers me. And so I call it sort of a gift because I spiraled down really fast then. And I went to do outpatient. I knew I couldn't quit without medical help. So I went to do outpatient, and that lasted about 1 day, and I knew that wouldn't work. And so then I had asked my brother in Grand Forks. He lined it up, went to Prairie St. John's. I had an option of Prairie St. John's or St. Cloud, where the Army has a treatment center, or Guest House, which is for priests and bishops. And I chose to go to Prairie St. John's because I grew up right in that neighborhood. And I sort of feel more comfortable around truck drivers and people like that because that's my life. So, but the night I got in there, I started wondering, maybe I should have gone to guest house, because there you get your own apartment. It's like the Taj Mahal. And at Prairie St. John's, there were 3 of us together, one room, three little cots, and a trucker was on the one side of me and a biker on the other side. And here's the priest in the middle. We got along well. We had a great time. It was very good. I'm glad I went there. And after that, then I went to outpatient. It's funny, the counselors didn't recommend outpatient. Blue Cross did. They already paying for inpatient. I said, so the insurance company says I have a problem? He said, yep. And so I went through outpatient, and then as soon as I finished that, they had already lined up to go to the VA for prolonged exposure for PTSD, for combat. And I did that. So 2015, I was in some type of therapy for about 11 months. But outpatient most of it, so I could go to the parish. And that's been about 5.5 years. I'm doing great. What's different this time? This time I surrendered. That's the big thing, and I do that every day. And this time I realized that it's not out there and I just have to stay away from it. It's part of who I am. It's part of my body. It's part of my cells. And it's just who I am. And I'm very allergic to alcohol. I'll let you know that. I use mustum up here. It's a wine that's fermented and then it takes the wine out. It's 100% grape juice. There's no wine, no alcohol in it. And that's what I use. Because I'm very, very allergic to it. Sometimes at the cathedral, I might have it in tincture things because there's not mustum there with all the priests. But even at that, sometimes afterwards, I'll get like a sunburn on my forehead. That's how quick I react to it. So it's not good for me to have alcohol. But if I come out to your homes or things, if you have a drink, it doesn't bother me. Don't worry about it. In fact, if you have quite a few, I'll stick around because I want to hear what you have to really think about me. No, it doesn't bother me. I don't have cravings. I'm grateful for all that. But every day I have to surrender. And I'm like I say, I'm doing just wonderful. I go around and I speak. I speak at Prairie St. John's. I go to places for the VA to speak, and I do quite a few fifth steps. In Grand Forks, did a lot of fifth steps. And I go to meetings at least twice a week. There's 2 online meetings I go to. Both are in Brooklyn, New York, where I used to live in that area. And so I know some of the priests there that are in this meeting, and we have an online AA meeting every Tuesday and Thursday. And then I had my home group, which is in Grand Forks on Tuesday nights. And right now I'm looking at the Thursday night group in Moorhead. I'm not sure yet, but I went online to that too this past week. And so if you ever have anybody who wants to talk about drinking or alcohol or drugs or anything, I'm happy to talk with anybody. And if someone you know that might have struggling with alcohol or I guess drugs too, I'd be happy to talk with them. You can tell them I'm not going to put handcuffs on them. I've been there. I know what they're going through. So they'll be under no pressure from me anyway if they want to talk to me. But I can tell you that there's nothing greater than sobriety in my life. It gets better and better every day. I asked my sponsor one day, I said, I wonder what it would have been like if I had never drank. If you never drank? I said, yeah. He said, you would have been an ass. Because he said, you're still an alcoholic. Doesn't matter whether you're drinking or not. You have that mindset. So I said, okay. So anyway, that's that. You probably won't hear me talk about it a lot, but I am available to anybody. And I everybody knows that's a decision I made right away. Somebody asked me in Grand Forks, does anybody know? And I said, about 4,000. So let the whole parish know. But I'm available for any of it and things like that. Now to the gospel of today. It's about the feeding of the 5,000 with the fish and the loaves. And really, in Matthew, what he's talking about, he's relating for the Jewish people, their flight out of Egypt. This is what this is really reenacting. And so you see where the people are following Jesus, in the gospel, in the scriptures, in the Old Testament. The Lord came to them by a pillar of fire at night and a cloud during the day. They followed it. Well, here Jesus goes during the night, and they realize he's gone, and they follow on the land and going around the sea. So the implication of, crossing the sea and coming into the promised land where they find him. And you notice that he said he had pity on them, for they're like sheep without a shepherd. And they find out, you have the 5 loaves and the 2 fish together make 7, which is the perfect number, the completion of everything in the kingdom of God. And it's also a reference to Elijah the prophet in the Old Testament, when he was somewhere and he wanted food, and they said, all we have is a few fish and a loaf. When we cook that up, we're all going to die. And he said, you won't die. Bring it to me. And so for Jesus, he says he orders the crowds to sit down on the ground. And it says about 5,000 men, so you multiply that, there's a lot of people there. And what that significance is very great. Have them sit down on the ground, order them to sit down on the ground. Because symbolism, they're coming out of Egypt, out of the place of slavery, walking by the Red Sea, coming into the promised land. They are slaves. They're coming out of slavery. They're slaves. And at the time of Jesus, when you went to dine somewhere, you'd lie down on your left side with your arm on a pillow. People would just lie down and eat. And the ones walking around were the slaves, and they would bring the food to them. And so when Jesus said, lie down, these people have come from slavery. That's all they know is they're slaves. They've been captive in Egypt. And here Jesus now is telling them, you're free. You're free. You've been redeemed by me and everything like that. And now you are in the promised land. And so that's what the significance of all of it is the whole coming out of Egypt, out of the place of slavery, into the promised land of the new covenant of Jesus. And then they gather up the baskets and so on, and there's 12 loaves left, symbolism of the 12 tribes of Israel, and now the 12 apostles. And so what do they do from there? Jesus says, gather it up so you can feed others. And that's where we come in, not only coming out of slavery, but once we've been fed, we are to get up and, in a sense, become slaves to one another in the sense of servants. Serve one another. And so where are we fed? Obviously here at the Eucharist. This is where we sit down and worship together and be fed by the body of Christ, the bread of life. And then from here we get up and go out, and then we serve others, one another. So when we go out, we, in a sense, as St. Paul says, I'm a slave to all. If someone weeps, I weep. If someone rejoices, I rejoice. So for us, when we go out, we're called to evangelize by what we say and do and who we are. You don't necessarily have to stand on a street corner, but at work, at home, just start with the basics. Smile at one another, as Mother Teresa says. And one of the people in the crowd said, you can tell she's not married. And Mother Teresa said, I heard that. She actually told it. She said, I heard that. And she said, sometimes I don't like to smile at Jesus, but I do. And so smile at one another. Don't go to bed angry, if possible. Those are all ways of really living the gospel. When you think about it, we can't control everything that's going on in the world, but I can control whether I smile at my spouse or my children or neighbors or so on. I can control whether I'm going to go to bed angry or not. No one's making me mad. I choose to get mad if I'm mad. So I can choose to not be mad. And so there's simple things, but we don't think of them a lot of times. They're hard to, we don't think about it. But it's so easy to do, really. It's hard at first, but it's easy to do. And then if we go to gossip, think about, as St. Francis says, he's big on that. He said, like if I'm going to say something about someone, I try anyway to remember, think about, why am I saying what I'm saying? Is this somehow benefiting this person? Or is it something that is it not true? Or is it true, but it's not for the common good? It's nobody's business about this person. And yet I might say it just because it's true and I heard about it. And it detracts from that person. So we want to think about those things. Why am I saying what I'm saying, especially about another person? If it's something good, well, be sure and let that person know too. I told Father Gellon last week, when I got back from Botno, I said, why don't you move out? He said, why? I said, people are starting to like your sermons better than mine. I told him, I said, people really like your sermons. That's good news. I want to be sure and tell them about that. And so that's an example. But anyway, that's enough about that. And but once we are fed here, then we are called through the power of the Spirit to carry that message of the gospel to one another.